Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the finals of the ESU Public Speaking Competition. My name is Sonia Yang, and I will be your chair for today. Public speaking can be a nerve-wracking endeavour, but as King Henry VIII once said, it's all in the execution. Now, I have no doubt that our speaker today will be able to execute their speech to perfection. The speaker in question, Eleanor, is a Year 11 student from Bromley High School and will be delivering her speech on the matter of whether or not parents should be liable for the illegal activities of their child. Now, Eleanor, may I remind you that you have 5 minutes, and I will knock on the table when you have 30 seconds left. Now, regarding this topic, this is a hugely contentious issue, and with some thinking that parents cannot be condemned for their child's actions, whilst others may disagree and believe that a child's upbringing stems from the influence of their parents, and so parental responsibility is key to their future behaviours. However, today we'll be hearing Eleanor's perspective on this. And on my left, we have our questioner Sreeja, a Year 10 student from Altrincham Grammar School for Girls, whose inquisitive nature, I'm sure, will allow us to delve deeper into this widely disputed topic. And now that I've rambled on for 60 seconds, without further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome for Eleanor to give her presentation.
There once was a leafy London borough where everyone was happy. The gardens were so manicured, the grass looked like it had been trimmed by nail scissors. Smiling citizens strolled through the market square, sampling local produce. The air was filled with delight, joy, and harmony. And oh yes, it never rained. And then they came in their barbarian hordes. The teenagers. Their aim? The destruction of the local mall. There was nothing this borough feared more than a school half day. In the interregnum between the authority of the classroom and the authority of the home was a wasteland where feral youth, armed to the teeth with cans of spray paint and silly string, reigned supreme. Residents barricaded themselves in their homes and took to the local borough Facebook group chat to mutter and murmur. First day back at school makes my blood boil. People out here just trying to make a living, and then come the hooligans, whose parents are probably unaware of how they behave on the street. Another murmured. Exactly what happens in a lawless society, where bad parents let their feral kids loose on this once lovely town. Members of the audience, these are actual quotes. I have not made them up. All kidding aside though, might these murmurers have a point, given that this event actually happened? We all know that schools are having to take increased responsibility over the behaviour of their children. However, the efficacy of this is compromised the minute the students leave the classroom. If at this point it's enshrined in law that parents are legally accountable for the misdemeanours of their children, it creates a seamless flow of jurisdiction and responsibility. As of now, it's rightly illegal for a parent to be neglecting their child. Therefore, it could be seen as neglectful for a parent to be unresponsive to patterns of poor behaviours. So this is merely an extension of an existing legal framework. I'm not rocking the boat. However, I'd like to clarify that I am not here to condemn parents. There is no one better to guide a child with love, respect, and patience. The parent is in the best position, firstly, to detect that something is wrong, and secondly, to intervene in such a way that's based on an intimate understanding and knowledge of their child. Parents who take the time to intervene when necessary will be celebrated. Now to the nitty-gritty. This model operates simultaneously on 2 levels. The first being protection, where excellent, well-being parents intervene when needed. The second is deterrence. Many were surprised when parents of a child who killed 4 children in school in Michigan were charged for their alleged role in this tragedy. The judge ruled that the parents, despite not being the murderers themselves, were directly responsible for enabling their child to commit this crime, and he felt it was necessary to establish a strong preventative precedent. This is an extreme example, and by this point, the whole of society has failed this child. How lucky am I that I feel safe, secure, and empowered, that the adults around me are unified in ensuring that I'm raised right so I can reach amazing things like being at the finals day at ESU competition. Anything at all that we can do to ensure that all children know that their adults have their backs. Anything at all that we can do to ensure that children feel as empowered as I feel, we must do. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor, for that eloquent speech. And now, I'm sure Sreeja, our questioner, would love to follow up on what has been discussed so far. Let's welcome Sreeja.
So, to begin with, could I challenge you for a moment? So, you mentioned this instance in your hometown of a group of teenagers coming to vandalise your local mall. How would you address counter-arguments that friends or youth gangs have a bigger impact on the illegal activity that children partake in?
Sure, I'm so glad that you brought this to attention, because there are so many instances where parents can negate responsibility by saying it's their social group. However, I'm a strong believer in the sense that the permeability of a child is only based on what their parents instill in them. If I was a parent, and this is the sphere of influence that I allow my child to have, then if he has a social group, or he, she, they, have a social group at school who try and influence them, but I've told them this is wrong, so they won't act upon it. But if you have a parent who allows their child to be so free to the extent where they think it's okay to fit into that group mentality where they vandalise malls or do even worse, then that is when social comes over parental. It's when parental isn't absent. Well, it's when parental is absent that social can thrive, basically.
Thank you, Eleanor. But just to follow up, children in the UK, as young as the age of 10, according to our age of criminal responsibility, should be held accountable for their crimes. Shouldn't we promote this?
So I think, to an extent, the concept of accountability is based on how much the decision that someone's committed is their own. And I think at such a young age as 10, your brain isn't even fully developed. My brain's not fully developed. So everything that I do is an amalgamation of what I've learnt, what I've been susceptible to, and what I've allowed to actually influence my behaviour. So for a 10-year-old child to do something, yes, it's a bunch of factors, the example of social, but it's also parental. And I'm a strong believer that parental factors are the major influence over the decision of a child and what they do.
Oh, thank you. A common theme throughout your speech was the idea of neglect, even in your answers. Could you expand on the role of neglect, well, what effect it has on a child?
So, as I've said, I strongly believe that if there isn't a strong parental influence to kind of, not necessarily thrust upon, but to show right from wrong, to tell your child what they should and shouldn't be doing, how to act in an environment such as this, for example, then a child has to make those decisions on its own. And as I said previously, when there's no quantifiers for how a child can act, they then become susceptible to other things which may not be as savoury as they ought to be. So yeah.
All right.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, thank you, Sonia. So, just to finish off, do you expect us, as generally more socially conscious individuals, our generation, to be more responsible and accountable for our own children in the future?
I'd love to think that. I would love for that to be the case where we're all responsible for everyone. I'm sure everyone in this room is very responsible. But the whole point of this motion is that for those who don't want to have that responsibility, who don't have the responsibility they ought to, this legislation will ensure that they have that responsibility, that they ensure that their child is brought up right so that they're no longer so that they're not put at risk. Because if you're not willing to change for your child, if you're not willing to look after your child, then you've got to care for yourself more than you do said child. And so it's kind of bringing the argument to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Sreeja for your judicious questions, and thank you to Eleanor as well for your equally as insightful answers. Now, if anyone in the audience has any burning questions that they are dying to ask our speaker, as I can tell from now, this is your chance, as I'd like to open up the floor to the audience. Yep, the lady in blue.
Thank you. You seem to be assuming that bad parenting is a choice. Bad parenting and a large amount of times can be generational. How does punishing improve the situation? Should we not be talking about education rather than punishment?
Do you know what? That's a brilliant question, and I'm so glad that this was sorted out so that we can sort out any misdemeanors in my message. So, in regards to the idea of a bad parent, I'm fully aware that it can be generational, where you don't know anywhere else to act or react to a situation. But I do think that this legislation, as much as giving the parent more responsibility, we can also instate something where if someone doesn't know how to parent, I mean, there are parenting classes that one can take. They can learn along the way. We're not condemning anyone for not knowing how to parent. We're condemning those who don't care to know to parent.
Yep, lady in blue.
You mentioned that parents know what's best for their child, but if the parental influence can sometimes be negative for those who aren't as fortunate as we are, could perhaps legal repercussions only strain familial relations and cause more scapegoating towards a troubled teen or someone who needs help?
That is such an interesting question. Wow, so let me just share my thought process. So first of all, the concept of familial strain being worsened as a result of this legislation. This would only be put into effect if a parent doesn't take apt responsibility over the behaviour of their child. Yes, this may put more strain in that parents who previously weren't as present in their child's life now come and are as such. But aside from that, I truly believe that this is a force for good, and that it will ensure that all children have a higher chance at having a better childhood.
So I'd like to give a huge thank you to the audience for your plethora of questions. They were truly very impressive in the most part, and some were even related to the topic. However, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. To conclude, I'd like to give a brief summary. To reiterate, our speaker's topic was whether or not parents should be liable for the illegal activities of their child, and Eleanor's stance was in support of this. She began with a powerful introduction, and her first point was on how schools are taking more responsibility for their students, and how rules that bound students change when one leaves the classroom. She then follows on with the theme of neglect, and how parents are the key aspect to helping children, and are the main figures to show love and kindness. Eleanor concludes that the two mechanisms in this situation are love and deterrence. her main message are that for the parents who aren't stepping up, that they need to step up and need to step up now. And something that I particularly enjoyed was Eleanor's experience and anecdotes of what happened to her own area related to vandalism. Something to also mention was that with Sreeja's insightful questions, Eleanor was able to further develop her points. Now, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on my comedic timing, our time is now drawing to a close. But before I go, I'd like to enlighten you all with one last blast from the past. Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher and fashion icon, once said that a wise man is he who knows he knows nothing. And thank God for that, because I knew literally nothing about this topic before Eleanor's introduction. Yet I'm supremely grateful towards Eleanor for giving me this opportunity. I'd also like to thank Sreeja, our questioner, the ESU for organising this competition, to the judges for giving up your precious Sunday, to the audience for coming along and taking part. But most of all, to the person who really brought this all together and made this truly special, myself. Thank you.